friendships. We talked a little bit about friendships last week, and that's what made me realize we're going to have to come back and revisit this topic of friendships. I remember when I was a kid, they had Disney's Aladdin playing, and there was a part where the genie, played by Robin Williams, was talking about friendships and how important it was to have friends in high places. He said, you'll never have a friend like me. I'm a really special friend, a very good friend to have. And some of us feel that way about ourselves. We feel like we are a really good friend. No one will ever get a friend like us. We're really someone special. But some of us are operating from a place of lack, from a place of want. And so we're going through life searching for that special friendship, hoping for, wishing for someone who's going to be this ultimate friend to us. And this can cause us to have high expectations of those who come into our life and offer to be our friends. It can cause us to put undue emphasis and importance on the very concept of having a friend in general. So instead of going through life and being casual and allowing people to be our acquaintances and associates without placing a lot of emphasis or expectation on them, we can become very expectant and kind of strict with our high standards regarding those who would like to be our friends. And then that can cause us to become very hurt when they do something that doesn't line up with our version of what a true friend should be or how a true friend should act. And so um, you you have situations, for example, where a friend might call another or text another and say, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I'm so sorry. I know we've been planning this for a while." A trauma survivor can flip out over something like this. What? We have been planning this for months. I cannot believe you would do this to me. How you are not a good friend. You are not a true friend. I am absolutely done with you. Never talk to me again. What causes trauma survivors sometimes to be extremely harsh and cut off their friendships for slight infractions? One of the things is perfectionism, right? So we had this idea, we bolstered up this concept of what a friend is supposed to be so big and so high that now when they fall short of perfectionism, we're going at them with the same level of vitriol and hatred that we go at our own selves because we treat ourselves that way in our head, tearing ourselves down, holding ourselves in condemnation and in judgment for not doing the most, being the best, hitting this standard that we have in our head of perfection. What's the problem with perfectionism, though? Perfectionism isn't an adaptive strategy to life because we don't live in a perfect world. There is no perfection to be had or seen anywhere here on this earth. So why would you be holding yourself to a standard of perfectionism and holding other people to a standard of perfection that they can't attain to? That's violating one of the laws of healing, which is that you're not seeing the universe as it truly is, but instead you're seeing it for what you want it to be or what you expect it to be. And then as a result, abandoning your relationship and really not being a good friend yourself. Because what are you lacking with that response? You're not being forgiving. You're not being kind. Lacks a bit of humility. Right. So all this setting up of the high expectations of our friends and setting up of taking the concept of friendship and putting it really high, it's fallacy. It's sort of like people in romantic relationships who put the concept of love really high. So they're dating someone for months and then they think it's a big deal if someone were to say the L word. You said you love me? Oh my God, girl. He said he loved me today. Can you believe it? He said he loved me. This should not be a big deal. Saying that you love another person, that's like the base level way of communicating in a romantic relationship. Like that can happen very quickly. You can say, "Hey, I love you." It means I treasure you, care for you, have an affinity for you. We don't have to dance around the word. Well, I don't want to say I love you because that means that we're going to be together forever. It's not that deep. Love means that you're focusing on everything that's beneficial about the person. And so it's the same with the word friend. A friend is someone who is not an enemy. That's all. It's not deeper than that. It's someone that we're acquainted with, that we get along with, that's not an enemy, but they work with us in some way, shape, or form. So we have to have realistic expectations of the world and in friendship. So here's a realistic expectation. We talked about this last week, but I want to reiterate it. Everyone will disappoint you, meaning everyone will let you down eventually. Everyone will let you down eventually. That's an inevitability of all relationships. Why? And is that being pessimistic? No, no, no. That's realistic. If you give someone enough time, they will let you down. The reason is because each of us are limited in our capacity to care for others. So someone could really, really love you, but they're limited in their capacity to care for you. They're not a god, they're just a human. So even those of you who are mothers, think about the times where you fell short of everything you thought you wanted to be as a mom for your own child. No one could say you don't truly love your child. That's not the problem. You've let your child down at times because you're imperfect, because you're limited, and your children have let you down too, even though you love them because they're limited as well. So, what we're going to be doing today is looking at some of the common questions about friendships so that we can adjust our mindset like this. Oh, people will let us down. That means that many will betray us. So, a lot of the people who were your friends at one time will not be your friends forever. And you have to see that as okay. You have to see that as something that you can cope with, you can handle. It's just a part of life. Many of the people you're friends with now will not be your friends forever. Why is that okay? Well, this comes down now to acceptance because it's a part of the way the universe works. A lot of times, these friendships that you have are based on proximity. And you might have noticed how once you grew up or moved away from certain friends, it was difficult to keep the same level of friendship. Have you ever noticed that? Like you will have someone that is really your best friend. But when you move away for a long time, or you're not integrated in each other's lives like you were when you were in school together or when you lived next door together, it's harder to hold on to that friendship. It feels a little more forced. It feels a little bit harder. It's like, hey, I'm calling you. I don't want to lose touch. How are you doing? Make sure you call me, right? So please recognize that a lot of friendships are based on, yes, convenience, proximity, and that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. So you're going to make friends naturally when you are consistent in various community groups, when you are consistent in various community groups. So this could be in your gym, in your sports group, your classes, your religious community. When you're consistent there, not once a month, you got to be going every week, multiple times a week, to the same place. It's going to be very natural for you to make friendships there. So, how do we navigate these friendships? Um, let's take this question. What do I do if a friend keeps crossing my boundaries? So let's say you have a buddy and you've told them that you have a certain boundary and they've kind of disregarded it and they've continued to cross that boundary. What can you do? Um, let's use an example. Let's pretend you have a friend who you've asked many times not to yell at you, and they get excited, sometimes upset or whatever, and they yell at you. You've told them that you don't want them yelling at you. You've explained that to them. They still yell. So, what do we do if a friend keeps crossing our boundaries? Does anyone know the answer to that? Which, but with boundaries, you have two basic actions. You have assertion of the boundary. This is where you assert or tell the truth about how you feel or what you need specifically. So, in other words, please don't yell at me. I don't like if you yell at me. I would appreciate you don't yell at me. Any of those are acceptable. That's setting a boundary. And then you have enforcement of the boundary. That's the second part of boundaries. So, how do we enforce our boundaries? In order to enforce a boundary, you have to remove access to your resources. So once you remove access to yourself, yes, or detach yourself from that person, you're enforcing the boundary. Okay. So that's the way we enforce it. It's just a natural occurrence that has to occur. When we fail to enforce boundaries, people will fail to respect your boundaries. It's just that simple. If you fail to enforce, they will fail to respect. When you remember to enforce your boundaries, suddenly people will remember to respect your boundaries. And those that don't, you're going to have to enforce. So in the case of the friend that keeps yelling at me, I'm going to remove access to my resources. My resources are my space, my time, my energy, my body, my presence, my advice, everything that I add to a situation, including my finances and money and material goods. So the next time that friend wants to hang out, it's going to be a no. I'm going to stop calling. I'm going to stop texting. I'm going to not be close to them anymore. I'm going to remove my closeness. We can do this at varying degrees when it comes to friendship. So some friends you realize just aren't your friend in one specific area because in one specific area you recognize they're falling short. So let's take, for instance, the example I used earlier of a friend canceling on you. They canceled plans. You've been planning it for months. You will find that when you recognize that you can enforce your boundaries just by removing a portion or piece of your resources without removing all resources, there may be no need to crash out like I did in the example and say, hey, I'm never talking to you again. You're not a true friend. You're not a good person. There may be no need to do all that. I might just say instead, okay, thank you for letting me know. I'll see you when I see you. Talk to you soon. Hang up the phone, make a mental note. Do not make plans with this person. See how simple that was? Protected myself, didn't have to call them any names, didn't have to tell them they can never speak to me again. I just said, I won't make plans with that person. And now I hold to this boundary when it comes to this person. And they say, hey, you know what would be great? How about me and you go to a concert in the Netherlands? You know, it'll involve us planning and buying tickets and doing this, right? They come to you the next time. And you just, that would be nice. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. That would be fun. You notice what I'm not doing? I am not making plans with that person. Why? Because I don't make plans with that person anymore. Why? Because I didn't like the way that they canceled the plans last time after I had spent that time and those resources on those plans. And so, since I don't want to continue to go through that again, I don't make plans with this person anymore. Does that make sense? So, here's how we're able to navigate the relationship. Do you see how I'm removing access to my resources without having to cut them completely off? So they can still sort of like be in my friend group. I can still see them from time to time. If it doesn't involve me having to make plans with them, that's fine. I see them when I see them. So when I show up at our company group meetings or whatever it is that we're doing, our activities, it's fine. I see them when I see them. Does that make sense? So that's an example of how to handle it when a friend crosses a boundary, especially when they keep crossing the boundaries. Of course, I can handle this in other ways too. I could reassert my boundary and I can say, hey, I got to talk to you and sit down and have a whole conversation with them about how they canceled this plan and I really need them to improve in the future. Why would I do that? Well, the benefit of doing that, I'm not required to do that, but if I do that, I give them the opportunity to change and to become better so that I no longer have to hate them, despise them, or cut them off from my resources. So I'm giving them an opportunity to still be able to have the privilege of making plans with me in this case. Does that make sense? So sometimes we'll sit down and reassert the boundary to give the person another opportunity. Otherwise, they lose access. Hopefully, this is making sense. Let's take another common question. How can we overcome the fear of being abandoned by friends? Sometimes fear of abandonment causes us to people please. It causes us to have anxiety. It causes us to sabotage relationships and abandon people before they can abandon us. So how can we get over the fear of being abandoned by friends? What can we do about that? So my advice to you is to conquer this fear or phobia through exposure therapy. So instead of being really careful about who you go out and make friends with to the point of barely having any friends, it's been 6 years since I've had a friend, and now I got this one friend because I'm so afraid of being abandoned. Can you see how that's going to get you abandoned more by percentage? Like if you only have one friend that you make in 6 years and you're doing that because you're afraid of getting abandoned, there's a high likelihood that this one friend might abandon you, and that's 100% of your relationships in 6 years, which will give you the false perception that everyone abandoned you, which will then put you back into trauma. You see what I'm saying? So instead, you want to expose yourself to the very thing you fear and create lots of relationships, lots of friendships, acquaintances, people in your life. And as a result, you'll notice something will naturally occur, which is many will naturally leave, abandon you, reject you. And you're going to have to naturally leave, abandon, or reject some as you get to know them. And then some will stick around, which will maybe be the minority. But that's okay. That's okay because we don't need that many people in our life to be our best friend. Just to have a few is enough. So again, if you're feeling afraid, you're having a fear of being abandoned, then you need to go out and start more relationships, acquire more friendships, more acquaintances, get more comrades. And then you won't be so afraid of this potential dark cloud of being abandoned by a friend. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Start more relationships. On average, I'd like to see you meeting 15 new people a month. That's how many people I would like to see you just meeting new people. 15 new people a month. Walk up to someone else in your congregation that you never talked to, introduce yourself, meet more people. Go to when you're at your gym, your kickboxing class, go up and talk to some more people. Talk to the outcasts, talk to the people that nobody else wants to be friends with. Be inclusive, be not so exclusive. Like talk to everyone, virtually speaking. If you notice someone has bad traits like anger or gossip, then maybe you don't go close to them. But go ahead and start lots of relationships. Let's take another example of a commonly asked question about friendships. Um, how can I stop overthinking whether my friends really like me? How can I stop overthinking about whether my friends really like me? So if you're one of those people who's always wondering and always overthinking about how your friends feel about you, cut it out. You're worrying about something that isn't that important, and you can't really know. So, this first thing about it's not that important is contrary to our nature. Evolutionary psychologists believe that we are optimized to care a lot about whether or not we're liked because we're afraid of rejection, because rejection would have meant that we couldn't survive in ancient times if we were ostracized from our tribes. Okay, so evolutionary psychologists feel that it's a means of life or death for you to worry about people liking you. But right now, I want you to elevate your mindset to realizing that it doesn't matter if people like you or not. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you will not be abandoned. That's sometimes the reason we're actually worried about them liking us is because we're afraid of the abandonment. So try to see that deeper cause. We're afraid that we're going to be abandoned. That's what you're really afraid of. You're afraid that you're going to get kicked out, ostracized, put on the outside, made fun of, all the things that are dark concerns for you. That's what the real problem is, right? Whether or not they like us is not important. What I want you to focus on is the way that you're treated, the way that you're treated. When you focus on the treatment, you have something concrete that you can base your relationship on. When you focus on their supposed feelings, you have nothing concrete to base the relationship on. Does that make sense? Also, it could cause you to um, excuse mistreatment. So let me give you an example. If I'm focused on the treatment of my friend Andrew, I'm sorry, if I'm focused on whether or not Andrew likes me, then what happens is when Andrew does little things that are not good for me, um, I excuse them because I believe he likes me. And if he's a manipulator, he can convince me that he likes me. Hey, Roman, I really like you. And I go, oh my God, that's so important to me to be liked. But meanwhile, he has, I don't know, started chatting with my girlfriend or something like that. He's getting too close to my girlfriend. So I'm so focused on him liking me that I'm excusing his behavior. I think he really likes me. I think he looks up to me. I think he probably admires my relationship. Instead of looking at the behavior for itself and asking myself, do I like the behavior? So that's what we want to really focus on is do you like the behavior? Do you like the treatment of this person? Do you like the way the person is treating you? Not worried so much about what they're feeling inside their heart because there's no way to ever know. They can tell you whatever they want. And in the end, it's not important because a person can like you and still betray you for $100, 30 pieces of silver. They can like you and still turn you over to the cops. They can, they can like you and still steal your boyfriend. Like that's not what's keeping you safe. And that's the mistake we're making mentally is we think if a person likes us, we'll stay safe. Instead, what's going to keep you safe is your boundaries, your standards, your boundaries, your standards, your boundaries, your standards. So when they start even getting a little bit out of line and talking to your girlfriend a little too much, you immediately clock the behavior and say, I don't like that. And so I have a choice. I can remove access to my resources, or I can talk to the person and reassert my boundary. But I'm going to stop this in the bud. And then bam, I'm stopping the behavior that I don't like and therefore making sure that I'm ensuring good treatment for myself and ensuring that this relationship will either blossom or if it's going to be toxic, I can get out of there faster because I'm not focusing on some invisible, intangible concept of whether or not they like me. And instead, I'm focused on what really matters, which is do they meet my standards? Do I like the way they treat me? Do they respect my boundaries? Does that make sense? So, what should we do when we realize that old friendships are no longer healthy for us? What should we do if you realize that some of your old friendships are no longer healthy? cut ties, let it go. Yeah, let it go. Walk away. If it's not healthy for you, it's toxic. That means it's poisonous. That means it'll harm you. So we don't want to hold on to relationships that are going to be harmful for us. We need to let them go and go out and make lots of new relationships and connections. Introduce yourself to lots of people. I like to see you introducing yourself to 15 people a month. That's one new person every other day. It's one new person every other day. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a healthy amount of interaction in your community. What do you say to friends that joke and disrespect you? So what do we do if we have friends that joke in a disrespectful way or they disrespect us and things they say? What should we do? Is that healthy? Is that a healthy relationship? That's not a healthy relationship, right? That's toxic. It's toxic because we need to protect our inner child. We need to protect our ego. And if we're around a person who's tearing down our inner child or tearing down our ego, then that's not going to be good for our healing. That's not going to be good for our sense of self-worth, our self-esteem. So we can either assert a boundary or we can remove access to our resources. Does that make sense? You assert the boundary, you remove access to your resources. I had an example like this. I think I told this story actually. It was some guys that I worked with, and I was like the manager of the team, so I was giving orders. Whenever I give an order, the guy was his name was Mark, real name. He would say, "Okay, Romo." He's like, "Okay, Romo." And I was like, "Hmm." I didn't like it, right? So first time, you let it go. Second time, he's doing it again. And I confronted him about it. So this would be an example of asserting the boundary because I'm going to have to continue to work with these guys. I'm going to have to continue to give orders. So I'm going to need them to respond differently. So I took him to the back of the truck, said, "Hey, uh, don't call me Romo. I don't like that." Just like that. Same face, same tone, same level of awkwardness, same level of authority. That's how you talk to people. Just get them, take them, just like this. And I'm just like, "Hey, don't call me Romo. I don't like that." Just like that. And then he was like, "Oh man, come on. What are you talking about, man? It doesn't mean anything. It's like Tony Romo, the football player. It's like Tony Romo, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, yeah, I mean, regardless, don't call me that. And I may have, as I have in the past, given him some suggestions for what he could refer to me as, but I just asked him not to call me that anymore. So he scoffed and kind of like, acted like I was being unreasonable. But you know what happened? He stopped. He stopped. It takes the fun out of it. You know, People are going to stop. They might try to get one more in to show you can't tell me what to do, but then they stop. They stop, and I was glad that he stopped because I don't like being called Romo. It was just that simple, or I didn't at the time, right? So it's just that simple. So so I asserted a boundary in that case. I asserted a boundary in that case. Why? Because this wasn't a situation where I could remove myself because it was a work environment. So I can't just easily just pick up my ball and go home. It bothered me, so I asserted my feelings. So I asserted a boundary. Does that make sense? Was he temperature checking you to see how far he could go? Always. We all are doing that to each other. Yeah, we're all doing that, and that's what it is. That's why you have to assert your boundaries. That's why I talk about being highly assertive because people are trying to check to see how far they can take things, push things, get away with things. It's subconscious. It's not always evil. This was not a narcissist. He was not an evil guy. Um, but we're always checking. We're always checking. It's the little things. I remember at one of my jobs, there was this boss. He was like a big Mexican guy. And it was my favorite job, by the way. But and I liked him as a boss, but I noticed he would get like physical with some of the other young guys that worked there. And I was a young guy, I was like 20, 21, 22. I was young, I was like 21, I think. And the other 20 something year olds, he would like rough with them, kind of wrestle with them, box with them a little bit, but he never laid a finger on me. And I always wondered, like, it's not that I wanted him to, but I just wonder why does he treat me different? But what I believe is that it's that temperature checking. Like people test little things and then they see how you respond to very little things. And so somewhere in there, I had passed, or if you could failed a test in which he's tried to see how far he could go with me and just got the impression I'm not the guy to go there like that with, which he was correct. I wouldn't have appreciated really being treated that way. I just wondered why he never did treat me that way. And that's you can he could tell that I wasn't one for that. And so be highly assertive, pause and think, take that rule of 7 seconds and represent yourself well.